This happened back in the summer of 2020, when I was 19 years old. I live in Washington State, out near the Olympic Forest. My parents own a few acres of property that back right into miles of thick woods. Growing up, I spent a lot of time out there, camping, hiking, exploring creeks. So by the time I turned 19, the forest honestly felt like home to me. That summer, I decided to camp alone for a night, just to clear my head. It wasn't anything serious. I grabbed my old camping pack, threw in a tent, some food, a flashlight, and a small hatchet. I left around 4 p.m., following the narrow trail behind our property that leads down to a small creek about a mile into the woods. I reached the spot just before sunset. The water was running steady and the air smelled like pine and moss. I set up my tent right near the creek bank, made a small fire, and sat down to eat. It was one of those evenings that feels still. No wind, no bugs, just quiet. Too quiet, honestly. I remember tossing a rock into the water just to break the silence. That's when I heard it. A soft whisper, coming from somewhere behind me. At first I thought it was the water or maybe the trees shifting, but then I heard it again. Clearer this time. It sounded like someone saying my name. Eli. It came so faintly that I thought I imagined it. But the second time, it was unmistakable. Someone had whispered my name. I froze. My first thought was that maybe my dad came looking for me, or my brother was messing around. I called out, "Hello?" But nothing answered. The woods stayed completely silent. I tried to laugh it off. Told myself it was probably just my imagination. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. When the fire burned low, I decided to get in my tent. I left the lantern dimly lit and zipped myself in, trying to relax. I must have fallen asleep for a bit because when I woke up, the fire outside was almost out and the woods were pitch black. I checked my phone, 2:07 a.m., and then I heard it again, that same whisper. But this time, it was right outside my tent. Eli. It was followed by this soft, wet sound, like boots sinking into mud. Then another whisper. Closer. I didn't move. I just lay there, holding my breath, listening. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I wanted to grab the flashlight, but I was scared that the zipper sound would give me away. Then, something pressed lightly against the side of my tent. Not a paw, not a hand, more like the back of someone's fingers, slowly dragging across the fabric. I bit my lip to keep from making a sound. It stopped. For a few seconds, everything went dead silent, and then, "Why'd you come back?" That was enough. I snapped. I grabbed the zipper, yanked it open, and shined the flashlight out into the dark. Nothing. Just trees and fog rising off the creek. But on the ground, right next to the tent, were footprints. Bare footprints, deep in the mud, circling around where I'd been sleeping. I spent the rest of the night sitting up with my flashlight in hand, waiting for the sun to come up. When it finally did, I could see the trail where the prints led, away from my tent, down along the creek, and then disappearing into the thicker woods. I packed up fast and started heading home. Halfway back, I noticed something carved into a tree trunk near the trail. It was my name. Just Eli, scratched deep into the bark, with muddy fingerprints smeared beneath it. I ran the rest of the way home. My dad and I went back later that day to check the area. The prints were mostly washed out by then, but the carving was still there. He told me it was probably just some drifter or hunter trying to scare me. But I've hiked that trail hundreds of times since I was a kid. I've never seen anyone out there. Not once. And sometimes when I walk past that same creek, I swear I still hear someone whisper my name. This happened in the fall of 2019, when I was working seasonal jobs up in northern Idaho. Most of what I did was clearing old logging trails, cutting brush, checking soil, marking safe routes for trucks. It was rough work, but the pay was decent, and I liked being outdoors. That month, we were stationed deep in the Panhandle forests. The nearest town was 40 miles away. My partner Kyle and I would camp on site for 3 or 4 nights at a time instead of driving back each day. One Thursday evening, Kyle had to leave early to get a replacement chain for his saw. He planned to come back the next morning. So that night I was alone at camp for the first time. It wasn't a big deal at first. I'd camped alone plenty of times. I got a fire going, cooked a can of beans, and sat there listening to the forest settle. Around 9 p.m., I remember thinking how quiet it was. No machinery, no engines. Just the crackle of the fire and the occasional owl. Then, in the distance, I saw headlights. They appeared far down the dirt road, two pale beams cutting through the trees. At first, I figured it was Kyle coming back early. I stood up and waved my flashlight once or twice. But the truck didn't move. It just sat there, engine running. After maybe a minute, the headlights turned off. Total darkness again. That's when I felt it. That uneasy pressure in my chest, like something wasn't right. I called out, "Kyle?" My voice echoed faintly off the trees. No answer. I waited a few minutes, then shrugged it off and went back to the fire. But I couldn't relax. Every few seconds I'd glance toward the road. Finally, I decided to grab my flashlight and check it out. I walked maybe 20 yards before I saw the truck again. Same spot. The outline was barely visible, but I could see the shape of an older pickup, white or maybe silver. I shouted, "You guys lost?" The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out and just stood there. Didn't say a word. He was silhouetted by the faint moonlight facing me. I remember the glint of his belt buckle catching the light. Then another door opened, the passenger side, and a second person climbed out. Shorter, wearing what looked like a heavy jacket. Both of them just stood there, staring. My mouth went dry. I said, "This area's closed. You need to head back toward the highway." Nothing. They didn't move. After about 10 seconds, they started walking toward me. Slowly, in perfect sync. No flashlights, no talking, just the crunch of gravel under their boots. Every instinct in me screamed to move. I turned around, killed my own flashlight, and slipped into the tree line beside the camp. From behind a cluster of pines, I watched them reach my fire. One of them kicked at the embers while the other crouched, picking up my chair. Then the taller one said something I'll never forget. He was just here. My stomach dropped. They started rummaging through my things, unzipping my tent, checking my cooler, even flipping my sleeping bag. The whole time, they never spoke again, just moved slowly, methodically, like they knew exactly what they were looking for. I backed deeper into the woods, careful not to snap any branches. I walked about 50 yards before crouching behind a fallen log. My phone had no service, but I turned it on anyway for the dim light. It was 11:47 p.m. For nearly an hour, I sat there listening. Every few minutes, I heard faint voices, too far to make out the words, but close enough to tell they hadn't left. Eventually, I heard an engine start. The truck's headlights flickered on, sweeping across the trees. I ducked down until the sound faded away down the road. I waited another half hour before creeping back toward camp. What I found made my skin crawl. My tent was gone. Completely gone. Just the flattened dirt where it had been. My cooler was missing, and the fire pit had been filled in like someone tried to erase any trace I'd been there. The only thing left was a single boot print in the ash of the fire. Not mine. I grabbed my backpack and started walking toward the main road. No flashlight, just moonlight. Every noise behind me felt like footsteps. I must have walked nearly 2 hours before I saw a pair of headlights. A big logging truck heading toward town. I flagged it down, waving both arms. The driver pulled over, and when I told him what happened, he just stared at me and said, "You shouldn't be out here alone, kid." Not anymore. The next morning, I came back with a forest ranger. We found tire tracks, footprints, and drag marks where my tent had been pulled away. But nothing else. No truck, no gear, no sign of the men. The ranger said they'd had reports of squatters using the old logging roads, maybe stealing supplies. But he admitted that no one had ever been caught. That night still sticks with me. Sometimes when I'm driving through those woods for work, I'll see an old white pickup parked just off the trail. Empty. Engine cold. And every time, I get that same feeling. Like someone is watching from the tree line waiting for me to stop. I never camp alone anymore. If you ever find yourself deep in the woods and think you're alone, listen carefully. Sometimes the forest listens back. This happened back in the summer of 2017. My girlfriend and I were driving from Portland to Seattle for a week-long trip. We decided to save some money by camping along the way instead of getting a hotel every night. We both liked hiking in the outdoors, so it sounded like a fun idea. On the second night, we pulled into a small campground in the middle of a national forest. It was already getting dark, and the ranger station had closed hours earlier. There was only one other car parked in the lot when we arrived, a faded blue SUV with out-of-state plates. We grabbed our gear, locked the car, and followed one of the smaller trails about 10 minutes into the woods until we found a flat clearing beside some huge cedar trees. It felt remote, almost too quiet. We got the tent set up, made a small fire, and cooked some instant noodles. Everything seemed normal for a while. Then the silence started to feel heavy. No insects, no birds, not even wind. Just that kind of stillness that makes your ears ring. Around 9 p.m., as we were sitting by the fire, my girlfriend suddenly stopped mid-sentence and pointed deeper into the trees. There was a light flickering out there, a warm yellow glow, maybe half a mile away. At first, I figured it was another campsite or maybe someone's lantern, but the weird thing was how it moved. It would flash on, then fade out completely, then come back, almost like someone was walking with it but changing direction. She asked if it could be a cabin. I told her maybe, but I didn't remember seeing any on the map when we checked in. We tried to ignore it, but the light kept catching our attention. After a few minutes, it began drifting closer, slowly weaving between the trees. I remember saying, "It's probably just someone walking their dog or something." But we both knew no one hikes in pitch darkness that deep into the forest without a headlamp. About 15 minutes later, the light stopped moving. It hovered in one spot, maybe 100 yards away. We could barely make out a faint shape behind it, like the silhouette of a person holding something shoulder high. That's when my girlfriend whispered, "It's facing us." The second she said that, the light blinked out. Total darkness. We sat there frozen, staring into the black space where it had been. I felt the hair rise on my arms. A few seconds later, we heard the crunch of footsteps. Slow, measured, coming straight toward us through the leaves. I grabbed the flashlight and shined it in that direction, but the beam didn't reach far enough. I called out, "Hey, you okay out there?" No answer. The footsteps stopped, then just barely audible. A sound like breathing, not animal breathing. Human, steady, raspy, deliberate. My girlfriend whispered that we should get in the car. I agreed, but our stuff was scattered everywhere. I told her to grab the keys while I kicked dirt over the fire to dim it. The last thing I wanted was to make us easier to see. While she was stuffing the flashlight into her jacket pocket, the light in the woods turned back on. But now it was much closer, maybe 50 feet. I could see the outline of a person holding what looked like an old-fashioned lantern. They weren't moving, just standing there, watching. My girlfriend said, "Let's go, now." We didn't pack anything. We just ran, straight down the trail toward the parking lot. I could hear her breathing fast behind me and branches snapping somewhere off to our right. When we reached the lot, her car was the only one left. The blue SUV we'd seen earlier was gone. We jumped inside, locked the doors, and sat there catching our breath. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the keys. As we started to pull out, my girlfriend looked through the passenger window and said, "Wait, stop." Down the trail, between the trees, that same yellow light flickered again. Then it blinked twice, then 3 times, almost like it was signaling. We didn't wait to find out what it meant. I floored it until we were miles down the highway. The next morning, I looked up that campground online. Turns out there used to be an old ranger cabin about a mile from where we'd been. It burned down in 1989. Locals said people still see a lantern light moving through the woods there at night. Some think it's a ghost. Others say it's a hermit who never left. I don't know what we saw, but every time I drive through Oregon and see a light in the woods, my stomach still drops. because the scariest thing about that night is that I still don't know if the person holding that lantern was alive.